Hi, Dr. Rob.
Good evening, Tammy. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're heading to a conference. He's leaving Southern California and I'm leaving Arizona. We're going to a conference in Minnesota. So, brr,
Minnesota.
Minnesota, yeah. So we have a question. The first one is it okay to ask your addict partner how they feel their recovery is going?
So I assume this is a spouse. So I actually would go one further. I don't think you should have to ask your husband or your husband in this case how his recovery is going. I think that couples are really well served by kind of coming together, let's say once a week on a Sunday afternoon and saying, this is our hour to just talk about how things are going. And especially if you've recently been through or in the first couple of years of recovery, I think that you as a spouse, you need and want that reassurance, but you don't want to necessarily be going to your spouse all the time and saying, can you reassure me? Is it, and I understand that, but I don't think you should have to. I think that if you sit down and you make a time, this helps with trust. And hopefully he'll tell you things like, this week wasn't the best week, and this week was a good week. And, within the boundaries of what's healthy for you guys to talk about, you'll talk more if you set a space for it. And then you just kind of slot yourselves in and say, well, here we are. Here's our talking time. How's your recovery going? How am I feeling about the relationship? I think that's how I would ask to be able to do that as a couple.
Yeah, and I like that you're saying both of them share, so it's not just the addict being accountable. It's like both of you get the space to be able to interact on the status of the relationship. And gosh, I really appreciate that you showed up for me like this today or yesterday or whatever, during the week. So like if there's affirmations that can be included as part of that is beneficial. If not, that's okay too.
And I think we're writing a little workbook here, Tammy. And I'm thinking that as the couple sits down, the addict can I think their focus would be how I'm doing in recovery, sort of to reassure or express concerns. I think for the partner, it might be more how I'm doing with trust, like how I'm doing with feeling closer to you or things that are leaving me. And, if you could have that conversation once a week, like an hour for how I'm feeling about our gaining or losing trust or together as a couple since all this happened, or how I'm doing in my recovery and how I'm feeling about us. That would be open a door to a better relationship. As long as you guys don't end up yelling and screaming at each other, you have to have the capacity to tolerate the conversation. Otherwise, do it with a therapist present.
Yeah. Well, I think if you set the framework for what this would look like and say, here's what we're doing, and if we need to take a time out and go, okay, that one's got me a little heated up, but, let's come back to that.
Hey, Tammy.
Yeah.
Can I just say something about the background?
Mm-hmm.
So this is Southern California when when there've been fires. The sky is all orange and red and dark like that. And this morning I woke up and there were major fires just right over the hill behind me. I could see them flaring up in the sky. Everything turned black. There's ash all over my patio. It's kind of like going through Italy when, in Vesuvius. So anyway, I just wanted to say, when we talk about fires out here, it really does, there's fires. I had a friend who had flames leaping over the freeway. They had to close the freeway because people were getting, so yeah, it's really very serious and very, very sad. Anyway, I'm sorry, but that's just on my mind because I could not take my regular ride home because they closed the freeway because there's fire, So anyway, and that's what.
But I'm glad you are safe, and I'm also glad that the Seeking Integrity clients are all safe as well. So.
Yes, well, I was a little worried about them, but they, when you're in treatment, you don't really think about much that's going on around you. So I trust the staff will take care of them. But It also does make for a very pretty view. So
yes, it does. Yeah. Okay. I have noticed over and over that I tend to be knowledge rich, but experience poor in quotes. In other words, I can go to seminars, to church, pay for classes, attend online groups, et cetera, et cetera. I enjoy it and feel positive about the information, but actually doing something with the information, applying it to my life just doesn't seem to happen very well. I'm noticing that in this whole process, I've been attending multiple online groups now for several months, but I still cannot seem to get even a few days of sobriety. What's going on? Is this typical for an addict? How can I change this? I'm seeing a lifelong pattern. It's disheartening.
Well, so there's a lot of questions in there, right? There's not just one.
Yeah.
the one that comes up for me, and this is the one I relate to, so and it's easy to talk about personally in a way, is I remember before I ever went to a 12-step meeting, before I ever went to a place to seek out help for my sexual issues, for sex addiction, I remember feeling about myself like I'd never really committed to anything. I mean, I went to school and I finished it, but I kind of did that because that's what I was supposed to do, and my parents expected it, and I got a job because I had to work, but I never really felt like I committed myself to anything. And I think I took up people and hobbies and interests, you know, they came and went, but I never really felt passionate, like I have to do this about anything. So when I went to my first support group live in person for this issue, I thought, oh, well, this will just be another thing. Maybe I'll come once in a while, and I never left. I think there was something about walking in that room and hearing the truth that those people, I felt for the first time that there were people who understood me. And I did have to be in the room with those people, and I had to go out and have coffee with them after. And I had to, you know, write and read my stuff to them and have them give me feedback. And it had to be more than getting information. I had to be in a relationship with people who were trying to change the same kinds of things that I was trying to change. And all of that, for some reason, was profound for me. I think that recovery is the first thing I ever really committed to. And it was because I went to that place and I felt a part of in ways that I don't think I'd ever felt a part of, and that made me want to stay. And so, you know, I don't know if any of this resonates for you, but there's something about just being in the space with the people and getting involved and making, you know, a couple of commitments. Here's another maybe little teeny thing is about those kind of places. You know, a lot of times when I go online to learn something, or I join a group, or I even go to a lecture, it's really all on my terms. You know, like I can watch or not watch, I can listen or not listen, but there's something about having obligation that makes a difference. So another thing I remember that feels right to say to you is, it wasn't just about my going to some meetings. I actually had to take some responsibilities, silly ones, like I remember I had to make the coffee, but I had to be there. I had to make the coffee. It had to be ready on time. And that may seem silly, but people were grateful for me for the, you know, or they weren't, or I was having all kinds of interactions. And in showing up where people had expectations of me that were reasonable, even little ones, but making sure I met those expectations in those kinds of places, I think was the beginning of feeling like I could really commit to things. So Tammy, I pass it to you.
Oh, I think great answer. And I was thinking the same thing. It's really easy. I've said this before too, is to like warm a seat in meetings, you know, and same whether it's a workshop or whatever, you know, you're still taking in information. The difference is the committing. I would encourage you to get a sponsor. Make sure you call your sponsor every day. And, you know, if you're just reading the 12 steps, that's not doing the 12 steps. So I would invite you to, you know, start actively. Yes, I'm going to start with step 1. You know, my life is unmanageable. Okay. How is it unmanageable? Even, you know, pointing to some of the things you say is like, I'm doing all that, I'm learning all this, but I'm not doing. So, you know, what, like you would identify, and then you'd have the support of, you know, a sponsor and a 12-step group or whatever, you know, your posse, however you put it together, to help you be accountable for that. And when you're accountable for that, to me, if somebody's counting on me to do it, just like you said, I got to make the coffee, you know, I'm going to show up and do it.
I'm going to put so there was something else and you know, it's funny, Tammy, I'm so used to being in a recovery world, which means to me that I will often frame my own experience or take my own experience and put it out there in some way. It doesn't mean that I can't give you research and data and tell you what 1,000 people are doing. I tend to be more folksy and use myself as an example, but I just want to say that because I've had folks sort of say like, well, you know, are you just talking about you? It's like, well, no, I'm not just talking about me, but I am using myself in a way to talk about things that maybe make them helpful to understand. Anyway, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to put a quote in the chat.
Okay.
And the reason I put this in is because what Tammy and I are really talking about is what it takes to begin to heal. And it's the one thing that I can't offer to anyone. I can encourage people, I can excite them, I can get them to think about things, but you know, it's things like motivation and commitment They have to come from inside. And I don't even think motivation has to come. What Tammy and I are talking about is you start showing up and you become accountable, even if you're not enjoying it, even if it's not fun for you. The goal in this is not to have fun. The goal is to grow. So if you're making coffee once a week and resenting it, that's perfectly fine, but you're still showing up with your resentments, and all of that comes through. But in any case, when I remember, so I'm going to back to talk about me for a second. When I was in early recovery, which was in the late 1980s, there was a whole movement about self-awareness and personal growth. And I remember this quote that I've never forgotten. So I'm sending it. Hopefully this goes to everyone. And you can tell me, Tammy, if it does.
It went to just me, but I'm going to copy it and send it to everybody.
Okay.
So it's all good.
This is a quote on commitment. And this is really how I learned to live my life, that I had to commit to things fully and wholeheartedly. And that was really new, because as an addict, I would commit to my relationship, sort of. You know, I'd commit to my date, sort of. I'd commit to my evening, sort of. And that's how I was, and I think some of you talk about it, I never felt like I never really felt like I committed. Like I said, I got through school, but I don't know that I was ever fully committed, all of me, to everything. I think for a long time I was about pleasing this person, making that person happy, checking this thing off the box. And I'll actually take this a little bit further, Tammy. Some of you guys know that we run a treatment center. It's called Seeking Integrity. We have a couple of men in treatment. And I can say to you that one of the issues that came up today was about who am I for men. It was a lot of, like I checked this box. I got the job. I got the wife. I got the kids. I got the, I joined the church. But I don't know if I don't know who the heck I am. And I don't think this is unusual for sex addicts. And I want to explain why. Many of us, the kinds of emotional injuries that lead to sex addiction, especially in men, have a lot to do with kind of having our own reality taken away from us when we're young, and our goal kind of being more about pleasing other people or being a good boy or doing it the right way, the way mom wants or dad wants. In other words, a lot of us grow up with a lot more focus on pleasing our caregivers than exploring who we are. I am extraordinarily good. I can go to a room full of people. I can make them all feel great and feel like the loneliest person in the room. Because what do I want? What do I need? Do I really want to be around all these people? Do I want to be serving drinks? Do I want to be having a party? I don't know. We just said we're having it now. We're having it now. I'm serving drinks. But I know that seems silly, but I think a lot of times men especially, and especially addicts, we go through life checking boxes, met that person's needs, did what that person wanted, got that accomplished. I'm proud of myself because that work thing happened, but there's something inside that's missing, and it has to do with a lack of commitment. It has to do with why we're doing the things we're doing. Sometimes what we do in treatment is I will help a man understand something he hasn't understood in a long time, like how much he loves his wife or how important those children are. Like when you're living a double life, it can be really easy to take your family for granted. And when you're sitting with us in treatment for a couple of weeks and you're not around them and you're sitting here wondering, are they even going to want me back? It's a really good idea. It's a really good opportunity to look at what kind of father have I had? Have I been committed to my children, my family? One more thing, and I'll stop. I promise, Tammy. I'm ranting. Part of being an addict is being mostly committed to what you want and what's convenient for you when you can get it. And that's not really what a relationship commitment is like, or a marriage, or a parent. Being committed to my marriage has to be a lot more than being committed to when it's fun, or I'm enjoying it, or I feel like following the rules. Being married, if that's what I choose to do, has to do with being present and fully voicing all of those things. And so I wonder how many of the men I work with, because they are addicts, because they haven't been present, how many of you, here's a really good thing to say. So many men, Tammy, will say to me, and I'm not saying this is anyone I'm working with right now, because I don't actually think that's true. It really isn't. But often I will have men say to me, I'm not sure I really want to be with my wife or not. I'm not really sure I want this marriage or not. I'm not, meanwhile, they're looking at porn, they're having sex with prostitutes, they're having affairs. And, my question for them is often, have you ever been in your marriage? Meaning, have you ever been fully committed to being an amazing husband, a fantastic father, or whatever that is? Because maybe if you invested in that as much as you invest in your work or working out or whatever it is that you're or acting out, you might find that you love your marriage or you love your relationship. But since you more see it as an addict as something to take care of or keep quiet or do whatever I need to do so I can go back to having fun, that's not commitment. That's just sort of, that's not a commitment to a family. That's a commitment to what I want, to addiction. So to all of you who have been actively acting out, who have been uncertain about, and I say this to any of you, maybe I'm not in the right relationship, maybe I need to find the right person. I would say to you, make sure you've really checked out the relationship you're in before you look for another one. Because maybe you haven't invested quite, just showing up, just putting the ring on your finger, just sending the check home, just being there to make dinner is not enough. And if you're here, you probably understand that. So anyway, thanks for that rant, Tammy.
No, it wasn't a rant. That was great information, and I concur. So, always looking for the next shiny penny and not understanding that you've got, a treasure trove right in front of you. So, Okay. So the next question, it says, my husband, addict, and I are working toward rebuilding our marriage, and we are trying to rebuild trust. What are the best ways to have full transparency, and what would that mean?
Okay. Well, for one thing, I did write a book a little bit on marital repair where a man's been cheating, and it's called Out of the Doghouse. And I recommend it because it is a really good basic book for a man to read on kind of what our responsibilities are if we're in a heterosexual relationship to a woman. What might it mean to have to heal that relationship? And the reason I bring this up is because, and the reason I wrote the book is because I have worked with men who cheat for 20 or 25 years. And I really believe that so many of us want to calm our spouses down, to help them feel like we get it, to have them be less angry at us, and we want you to believe that we're moving on and things are going to get better, but we have no idea how much pain we really cause you when we cheat on you. And I know this because I see men who really sincerely want to make their relationship better having cheated, try to make it better with flowers or vacations or, come on, babe, aren't you going to get over it? It's been 60 days, and that just doesn't work. It might work if they forgot to bring dinner home, but it's really not going to work for betrayal. So Out of the Doghouse is a book I wrote to help men understand what they have done when they betrayed a woman and what it requires to do for her and for the relationship for it to heal. And by the way, the key word to this book, commitment. But you want to show them, Tammy? I have a feeling
I do. I do. Because I'm going to start keeping them out because I need them more often. So there's two versions of it because Marnie Faree co-authored the version for men who want the Christian context, the biblical context for the book too. So there's two versions.
And for those of you who are just joining us, I refer lots of people's books, not just my own, but I haven't actually seen Tammy hold up other people's books. It's very nice of you, Tammy.
I have Enid Gray's Neglect book.
That's a really
I actually, book. Yes, I actually have books all over the place, and I do hold up others. So,
we have more questions.
Yes. So my spouse states that he has not acted out in 10 months, but continues to blame, lie, and no communication. He states he doesn't lie about everything, and why would he lie about acting out? Sorry. He has read all your books, watched videos, but no change or commitment. He hid your sex addiction workbook under the couch cushion, and when confronted with clear proof, still denied and lied about it. Obviously, this leaves me feeling he is still acting out. Your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm going to try a little something different in my brain. I'm thinking maybe, what do you want? Like, what do you want is what I'm thinking. And I don't mean to shift gears, but, at a certain point, I think when I let someone know my pain, and I'm going to say this on two sides. First, I'm going to say this part because I don't usually say this part. If I let somebody know my pain and I've let them know what I need and I've clearly pointed out what's going on with me and they don't respond or their response is tepid, I'd probably have feelings about that. I'd probably feel let down or disappointed or like you don't get it, and I'd probably be saying those things a lot. And what can sometimes happen is then that person will just turn around and say, I'm tired of hearing it, or I don't want to hear about it anymore, or leave me alone. And, that can mean a couple of things. I mean, it could mean that they think that you can just be put off a lot longer, and they can keep, you know, and that really you're just a complainer and a whiner, and you're never really going to leave them or walk out or do whatever, or lock the, you know, change the locks or whatever it is we do. You're just going to put up with it. And so they may just be pushing you aside, you know, or anyway, I don't hear commitment. This is the theme for tonight. And one of the things, you know, let me untie one of these things. I do think, and I wrote about this in Doghouse, I think, that there is a timeline difference between there's a difference in getting sober, stopping a behavior, and becoming a better person. And I understand, and so I'm going to speak to the other side of this. One side of it is, as a partner, how much do you want to put up with? What are your needs? What are your expectations? Write them down. Talk to them with a therapist. Talk to them about them with your husband. You know, make it clear, or your partner, that what you need and want, and see if that's even possible. But at the other side, I do want to say that there's a difference between no longer acting out and doing things that I know will hurt you and being a good guy. Especially in early recovery, because I might go through 6 or 8 months of finally stopping the behavior, and then that took a lot of my focus and energy. Now I'm left with who the heck I am without all of that. That I'm just a series of coping mechanisms, or as some of the men that I'm working with often say, I don't know who I am if I'm not hitting on women, flirting with women, or being the star, getting the successful job. That, you know, if I'm not defining myself by all that, who am I? And so it can take a while to figure out who you are and what you want to be committed to beyond sobriety. So there is, I think, in some ways for spouses, a need to kind of think, okay, at least he or she's going to meetings, they're going to therapy. Most of the time they seem to be fairly accountable. You know, I'm hoping it gets better. And we'll start couples therapy at a year and see if we can make it better. On the other hand, some people aren't going to shift. They're not going to get better. They are going to stay stuck. And you kind of have to say, you know, I'm not sure I'm going to put up with this forever. And I don't know, you know, where in that process you are. I would suggest, I know Tammy's going to say this, couples therapy. Because, and she can even recommend people in various cities around the country. We also do couples workshops where people can come sit with us for a couple of days, and we'll help you figure it out. In fact, Tammy, I will say to you that I think the primary issue that I hear so many of these stories here and in the rooms. I think that we should think about really focusing workshops on, or a workshop on, when couples are at that point where the person's really in recovery, but the spouse is not feeling the effect. And I think that balance between, is it that I'm not ready to love them, or they don't believe me yet, or they're suspicious, or you know, there's that 10-month, 2-year, eventually they get back on track. But anyway, we do a lot of work with that. But this is a couples therapy issue. You need to sit with someone who, because you have your side and he has his side, and probably your side is pretty right, but there's probably some things on his side. You kind of need someone to sort of straddle the middle in this kind of story. Tammy?
Well, a bunch of things. Yes. And I put the link to the couples workshop, and it talks about the goals, you know, communication skills, learning how to have respectful and productive conflicts, you know, establishing and implementing healthy boundaries. So those are all things, you know, that are part of this couples workshop that we offer. But yes, as Dr. Rob said, I can help you find a qualified couples therapist, because not all of them get addiction. But we've talked before on the webinars about how little training there is in addiction for therapists as they're being trained, but then you slice that down even more for infidelity and sex addiction, et cetera. So there's too many that aren't really qualified and actually can, I think, make things more challenging. But I am concerned, though, because at 10 months, that he is still in such, it sounds like denial and the lying and all of that.
Yeah, I have to say, but so, okay, so Tammy, I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
So I ran groups for female partners for a long time. And I also ran groups of male sex addicts for a long, long time. And this is nothing about the person who just wrote in, but it is absolutely true that I can hear a story from a spouse, and I am absolutely convinced that that addict was awful, terrible, horrible, you know, and then I hear the story from the addict, and it's like, oh, my spouse didn't see what I was trying to do, how I was trying to, you know, and everybody's sort of so hot because it's so new, and you know that I'm not ready to give you credit, you're not ready to really validate. I mean, I just think it's hard to see who is who and what is what at this stage. It just is. And this is a great time, a great time. He's sober, you're confused, he doesn't know what to give you. Go to therapy as a couple. That's what it's for. Pay off some of our debts. Thank you.
There you go. Okay. So the next one, what are the best ways for an addict to avoid relapsing?
So let me just, maybe, and again, you could get anytime you ask me, you get 10 different answers, and Tammy will have a couple of answers for sure. But this is a good opportunity for me to name the 2 times which sex addicts are most vulnerable to act out. So when are we most vulnerable to not be able to stay sober? There's 2 times. And what are our, as sex addicts, our greatest triggers to acting out when we're the most vulnerable and we really need to watch out? Number 1 is unstructured time alone. Unstructured time alone, like it's a holiday weekend coming up and my family's going away to see her family or his family, and I've got the whole weekend ahead, and I'm thinking, I've got a whole weekend, 3 days just to relax. But then a couple of days, then I start thinking about how I want to relax. And then I'm thinking about, oh, and on Saturday I can do this. So stretching out a lot of time with no accountability and no plans with people is a bad idea for us. Our second most vulnerable time, which is kind of related, is travel. When we go to another city alone or even with a spouse, it feels like we're anonymous, like nobody knows us. I'm not going to run into my next door neighbor or friend, so I could just go off and do whatever I want sexually. No one's going to find out. And it's that feeling of being disconnected and kind of off the radar of the family and the connections that actually makes us really vulnerable. So I can tell you that those are 2 things to watch out for. Tammy, why don't you pick up on the question and I'll jump in.
Well, my first thought was when we're awake. So I'm sorry, it's been a day, but it's one of those things. Mean? Well, just because we're awake, so we're thinking about, it's like, oh no. So my whole thing is the relapse doesn't happen in the moment of the relapse. I talk about this a lot too. It's like, it's all those other things. So for me to have.
Wait, tell them what you mean by other things, like, because you're
okay,
talking about.
All right, it could be, sure. Thank you. Slow me down. So like if my trigger happens to be like stress, if I'm all stressed out, then I need to relax and I need to divert my energy and I need to check out, numb out, do whatever. Okay.
Go have fun.
Yes. So I 100% agree with the unstructured time being a problem. So for me, making sure that I had a plan, that I had support, that I was checking in with people, really, so like the guys that come to the Seeking Integrity program, they have an aftercare plan. There's a plan. If you're going to 12-step meetings and you're working with a sponsor, there's a plan, so if you have a plan and you're working on that plan, for me, I still do, and I've been around a while, but I still do things on a daily basis to connect with my recovery. And it's not like I have to spend 3 hours every day working on recovery, but I still do those touch points so that I'm doing things, that I'm grateful for my recovery. I'm thinking about my recovery, not thinking about, oh, I wish I was, whatever. So I think, I think a lot of it for me is, somebody said the other day that, I'm on some recovery group things, and they were like, I want to beat this, this addiction. Right. And I was like, I never think I'm going to beat addiction. I understand that it's always present. I can keep it at bay, and I can live in the light of recovery.
Well,
if
I would take that.
Go ahead.
I would take that one step further. I would say addiction is my friend, because when I feel like drinking or using or having sex with strangers, that's actually good information that there's something going on. It's like a kid pulling on my sleeve. As long as I pay attention, if I go drink, if I listen to the message, I'm lost. But if I just feel the tug of the addiction, actually that means something's going on inside of me that I need to pay attention to. And that can be useful unless you, like Tammy said, you just say, oh, I hate that addiction. I hate it may have saved you in many ways.
Yeah.
So don't throw it away. Embrace it in a way that you can learn from it. Okay, let me just answer the quick question. Best ways to an addict to avoid relapsing: accountability. The more accountability so let's say that you're someone who tends to have sex on the way home from work, or on the weekends, and when you're online. So that would mean that You need to make plans for your weekend. You need to structure. You need to make sure that you're checking in with people. Every time you go online in the evening when you're alone, you need to call someone and say, you know, I'm about to go online and I'll call you in a couple hours when I get off. You need to create boundaries and structure that involve, and accountability that involves people. And as long as you are accountable to other people for your behavior, unless you want to lie to everyone and set up all these elaborate traps you're not going to pay attention to, which would really be a waste of time, maybe you're just going to start to get better, because the opposite of sobriety, the opposite of addiction is connection. And when you start connecting and you make yourself, it really goes back to what we talked about before, which is, you know, it's not just about showing up, it's about being responsible and having to show up even when you don't feel like it. Yeah.
Yeah, but even when I don't feel like it, you know, as soon as like you start doing or connecting, you know, I'm so grateful that I did, but I'm 100% with you. I'm grateful to be an addict because I didn't have life tools to use. And so recovery has given me those and the meaningful connections in my life, you know, so I'm incredibly grateful. So for the betrayed partner, how do we deal with sadness about what we thought we had, looking back on our life together and it feels like lies?
So, just, I don't know, to this betrayed partner, I don't know how long you've been dealing with this issue, but I can tell you that first of all, I can tell you, please don't do this by yourself. I'm going to make Tammy type again, excuse me, Tammy, in the chat or pull up. We have a link for betrayed partners. We do a group free. There is no charge. The person who runs it is a volunteer. We have about 14 groups on this website, just like this one, but some of them are Q&A, some of them are drop-in, some of them are webinars. Please come and join some of the other women, because it will be a group just for women or a group just for men who've been betrayed. Because I think one of the best ways you can learn to work with your sadness and your pain and separate it out from feeling inadequate, feeling like it was your fault, feeling like you did, like, it's okay to grieve. Grief, I get, you know, you hate this, you're mad, you thought you had this, now you have that, and sadness and everything that comes with it, anger, you know, bargaining, all of it makes sense. But when you're around other people, you can also get a little bit better sense of, well, wait a minute, it wasn't anything I did or said, and maybe he or she was like this before we even met, and you'll begin to get some perspective. And it makes it easier to grieve when you have perspective, because then you're not blaming yourself. So I would expect yourself to grieve, and, you know, it's not like you won't look at him in the same, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, you won't ever, by the way, okay, so you have probably heard my little talk on betrayal, so I'll do my little talk on betrayal. I don't mean that in a silly way. It's just I haven't said this here for a while. So my visual on betrayal is like a plate. A marriage, a relationship, a commitment where you both believe in the same things and you both have the same goals. And then if one of you decides you're going to go in a different direction without telling the other, breaks the plate. You know, and it could be, I'm going to take our money and go and invest in the stock market, and you think I'm saving it for our kids, breaks the plate. It's more painful if what breaks the plate is you think I'm being monogamous, but I'm not. But so this is your relationship. It's broken. And it is never going to be a whole plate again, meaning you'll never look at him or her and say, oh yeah, like you can't. You'll never look at him or her and say, wow, I know that he or she would never purposely do something that they know would hurt me just because they wanted to have fun. Because if you've been with one of us, you know that we can go out and absolutely buy on purpose for a choice, not purposely hurt you, but purposely do the thing that we want to do because we want to do it knowing. So most of us marry the other person or commit to someone thinking that person will never deliberately go out and do something they know would hurt me. Well, now you know you're living with someone who can split themselves off emotionally from you so powerfully that they can actually ignore your existence and go on. They can do that in their illness. You now know that. And so you can never look at them in that same kind of like, oh, we got committed and we thought everything was going to be vows, and, you know, they broke that. However, you know, it's a really good thing to glue a plate back together and see how it works. What you're going to find out is that it will never break in the same place again. That's actually one of the strongest places. And so will your relationship have a crack that you will always be sad about? Probably. But could it be stronger? Could it be more honest, more intimate, more profound? It might be a much better relationship than the one that you did have because you've had to work through all of this pain. You I'm not a very spiritual person in the ways that Tammy might be. You don't hear me talk about that, but I do believe that that I don't believe we're given things for a reason, but I do believe that what we make of things in our lives is a test of who we are. And if you can face your pain with bravery and work through it, you will be a stronger person. And if you face your relationship pain as a couple with courage and commitment, you will be a better couple. Even though it won't be the same, it might actually be stronger. And one more thing. Every spouse I've ever worked with in the beginning says, well, if he or she lied about this, then I don't know if anything we've ever had has been true. I don't know if anything they're telling me now is true. And I don't know if anything that ever is going to happen in the future is true. And that's where you should be at, because trust has been broken. And until it is repaired, you're not going to believe anything. That's how it goes.
I've actually shared your plate analogy with people. I've said that you've shared that on the webinar, and I really believe that that is the case. But I think, when you get married and you're young and all that, you have there's this luster of everything's going to be, perfect forever, and, I think as you enter into this, you have the veneer of, of all shiny, wears off, but you really do. You have this foundation, and for couples that have gone through this together, you have a foundation that you guys have made it through this, and you're on this path together, and it's a whole lot different, but it's a whole lot more honest and true. Mm-hmm. So speaking of the couples workshop, this person says, we attended the Seeking Integrity Couples workshop. It was just a weekend ago. What a difference this has made for us in being able to move forward together. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. Wonderful to feel heard and helped. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm so glad. Hey, Tammy, I do want to read the one above that.
I was going to read that next, but I want you, it's written as a comment, but I really like you to talk about it. So,
wait, before you do that, I'm sorry. I put something in the chat for you guys.
Behavioral problems require behavioral.
Yes, it's very formal therapy talk, but I want you to think about it, because it's true. If you have a problem with your behavior, meaning your sexual behavior, your romantic behavior, your drinking behavior, if you have a problem with your eating behavior, if you hurt yourself and you have a problem with your self-harm, these are all, if you steal, if these are all behaviors. So when you need therapy for a behavior, you have to go to a therapist who works with behavioral problems. A general therapist may talk to you about a lot of things, but if they don't say things like, you need to go do this and you need to go do that, and have you thought about, in other words, the work we need is very interactive, it's very alive, having a therapist who just sits back and says, well, that's very nice, that's talk therapy. We are in our addictions at a place where we need action. And cognitive behavioral and other behavioral forms of therapy, it's not that the therapist isn't aware that there may be other issues, trauma. We are very aware of it in treatment, we talk about it, but we are also aware that the most important thing is, like, you didn't come to see me because you wanted to be a better person. You came to see me because you wanted to save your marriage, and if I don't help you stop acting out, and I don't help you soon, then you might lose the thing you came to see me for. What difference does it make how much insight I give you into your history if I haven't helped you stop the thing that was going to help you lose your job or your life or whatever was important to you? So understand that the behavior comes first if the behavior is destroying your life. And you can sit in therapy for 300 years talking about what your mother did. Believe me, I have talked about that. But I also had to change my behavior, because don't you understand that if you're still acting out and you're going to therapy and you don't talk about that in therapy and you're not dealing with it directly in therapy, and I can tell you this as a therapist because I've been on the other side. I listen to you guys and I'm thinking, well, this is really silly. This person's paying me for nothing. They really are paying me for nothing because they're not really talking about or willing to do the things they really need to do. So behavior change involves changing behavior. If you want to change alcohol behavior and drinking, you don't just do it by sitting around saying, I'm not going to drink anymore. You have to start doing things. And good therapy with any addiction or behavior teaches you the behaviors, the things that you need to start doing to make your life different. We don't just say stop drinking or stop using or stop sexing. We say start living. And unfortunately, living isn't quite as exciting in the moment as what we have been doing. Living is things like hanging out with friends, taking up a hobby, going for a swim in that ocean over there. That's what living is. It's fun, but it's not nearly as exciting as doing drugs and having sex. So part of it is we have to put down the intensity that we've been living with to begin to join the human race. And that is the process of recovery. So that's why I wrote something about behavioral problems require behavioral solutions, because if you have a problem with the way you act, you have to start acting differently.
So there's a comment, you hit the nail on the head. I don't know what I want. I have no relationships, no children, and right now, no job. The idea of committing to a relationship is more horrible freaking thing than I can imagine. I just couldn't do that. So I have never had a long-term relationship. This person is gay, but was engaged for 3 months, 3 months of hell.
Well, welcome to the party. And I say that in a warm and engaging way, because what we're talking about, whether you've had too much sex or too little, whether you choose consistently the wrong partners and never pick the right ones, whether you've decided I'm not going to have any more sex or do any more dating, I'm just going to stop the whole thing because it never works for me. All of that is a line, a continuum of problems with intimacy. It's all too much or too little. We all want, trust me, as human beings, to be connected to loving others. That is really what makes life worthwhile. Even if you didn't grow up connected to loving others, we're still on some level trying to seek that out in adult life. So if, the people that we see in treatment, I have to say, it's interesting because, Tammy, okay, I'm going to work this share into something I want to say and show, actually. Ooh, this might be more work than I can handle. Do you mind if I Tammy, answer the rest of this question? I want to show them something.
Well,
or just give me a second here.
I'll give you a second. So my thought though is,
yes,
yeah, because it's like committing to a relationship is more freaking thing than I can imagine. And I'm like, I feel so sad that connecting to people in any kind of way, shape or form, is so terrifying. Because as Dr. Rob was saying, like that, I think is what, gives our lives meaning. So to be so isolated, to whether it's, sexual acting out or porn addiction or whatever it is, but to have it be so disconnected, from everybody else, to me is sad. And I can understand it being terrifying, but even if it's terrifying, like, I'm thinking like if, dip your toe in and just go, okay, I'm just going to do this. Like Dr. Rob said, go to a 12-step meeting and make coffee, so you have to be there, and it's okay to be uncomfortable. I don't, the freaking out thing is not good, but being uncomfortable in my own skin was how I lived until I, had been around long enough. Yeah. Yeah.
And I do want to, I couldn't find what I was looking for, and I'll bring it up later, but I do want to say to you, I also, I'm thinking of, there was a Greek figure. I know I'm being weird, but I don't mean to be. I'm going to get this right. Well, Sisyphus was the guy who kept pushing the rock up the hill and it kept rolling down the hill. But there's another guy, and one of you can tell me, probably I'll type it in. But there was this guy in Greek mythology who was forever thirsty. And he was standing in a pool of clear water. And whenever he would dip his head down to drink, the water would lower too much for him to have it. So he was always tempted by the water, but he could never reach it. And he was forever hungry. And there was a grape tree hanging with lots of grapes over his head, but it was just a little bit out of his reach. So he was thirsty and hungry, tempted all the time, but never reached the things he really wanted. This is you, You are like every other human being. You long for connection, but it's terrifying. Things that have happened to you or things that you struggle with inside leave you fearful or worried or not wanting connection or commitment. But let me just say to you, I can relate to this and I understand this, and I think that you can grow from this. If you can think about starting to commit in little ways, you said, and look what you said. You said the idea of committing to a relationship, which I assume you mean like married, living with forever, is more than a horrible thing that I can imagine. I couldn't do that. I never had a long-term relationship. Okay, you might be someone who needs a dog. Really. You might be someone who needs to raise a dog. Thank you, Tantalus. And of course, that was the name of that guy. Why, Tammy? Because he was tantalized all the time, and he could never get his needs met. No matter how hard he tried, he was tempted but never could. That's not what being a human being is like. We're not supposed to go around like empty ghosts waiting for something to fill us up. We have to actually seize life and connect with people. And unfortunately, addiction is just like digging a deeper and deeper hole away from connection. But that doesn't mean, it's just kind of like the woman earlier who said, you know, my husband stopped acting out, but he's still kind of an asshole. Just because you stop your addiction or you and you start to grow doesn't mean you know how to have a relationship. But are there some small things that you could commit to? You know, could you commit to some friends? Could you commit to an animal shelter? Could you, if you can commit to giving some of yourself a little bit at a time, it's going to grow and yield really big rewards for you. Because people who are afraid of relationship, you know, if you get into relationships where you're doing more giving, you're going to feel a lot safer and more in control, and you're going to find healthier situations for yourself. So keep trying. And by the way, I'm really glad you asked that. And I want to tell you, I was single for 9 years, trying to figure out who I was and how to date and how to get along and what is sex. I don't wish that on you. So, but I do understand it can take a while.
So the next question, if you were in a situation where you definitely feel like you still need help with regard to cheating, lying, flirting, checking out women, and help with even just the simple step of not wanting to do these things or feeling the urge to flirt or do double takes of women, etc., but you have been successful at not doing anything sexual with anybody for a long time, do you see an inpatient workshop at Seeking Integrity as necessary?
Well, Tammy, I have to say, when people call Seeking Integrity, you usually answer the phone. So, because I'm usually teaching, or so how I really want to, if someone called you and said this, what would you say?
Well, we always give them the free resources. However, I always say you can go to see a qualified therapist, and there's, again, that is limited. And if you're going to 12-step meetings and you're working with your sponsor and you're seeing your therapist and you're doing individual and group therapy and you're doing all of that weekly and you're really engaged in that, I think you can make good progress, and probably after, a year to 18 months, I think you'll have a solid foundation of it. The difference with coming to a program such as Seeking Integrity is it's so compressed. So within a 14-day period of time, you get through all the yuck and the shame, and well, not all of it, but you get through a lot of the shame, and you get tools to use and a plan. So it's like, okay, I'm still struggling with flirting. So what did they suggest I do? Well, there's a plan, there's a plan that, and you didn't have to think of it yourself or work on it for a long time.
Yeah. I just want to say, like, I'm grinning, and I think probably one of the guys who's in our program right now is grinning because he's getting ready to leave, and we talked to each other a little bit tonight, and we talked about this very issue, and hold on just a second, I wanted to, what we talked about was we agreed that the issues he came with, he wasn't cured. Like, he wasn't going to not struggle with them anymore. And we met about that, but he said, I quote, "But I'm not ashamed anymore. I don't hate myself anymore. I kind of understand where it comes from. I'm able to make clearer decisions about how I want to go forward and who I want to go forward with." And that was worth the price of admission. At least that's what I heard from him. And also he knows, you kind of get, well, what are the signs I'm in trouble and what do I do? And you get all of the addiction stuff, but there's a lot, I think so I'm answering the question now. I created this program, and I really have trained a lot of people who are in the field. A lot of people run programs. I know what's going on out there, but I wanted something that didn't just help people figure out how to change their behavior. I wanted everyone who comes to understand what's wrong with them. Like, and I mean that in the most realistic sense. Like, and Tammy, this might be because of how I grew up, and I grew up in a family where nobody would actually say, your mother is mentally ill. And the reason she goes crazy and the hospital takes her away and she's gone for a month is because no one ever explained to me what was wrong, why my family was so effed up. And years of therapy are required to figure out what exactly happened and why and what that meant. And I think that if we can work with you for a couple of weeks and say to you, I really think this happened, that happened, it led to your kind of not getting your needs met in a healthy way. You kind of get them met in that way, but understand, reduce your shame, redirect, refocus you, help you find your priorities, and really help you understand what kind of foundation you need for you, which might be different for someone else, to drive you forward. I think that's a lot. And that is 1.5 years of therapy. I mean, I always have said that. I was really good when I was out there as a therapist, individually and group. No, I didn't send a lot of clients to programs because we did a lot of intensive work in treatment. But not every therapist is going to be as running every end of it, you know, doing group and individual, and, you know, not every therapist is going to be as focused on you, you know, and then more is helpful. But listen, I recommend workshops. I recommend, you know, whatever it takes, read a book. I mean, however you can grow, you know, jump on it and take the ride.
Yeah. So, yeah, good answers. I'm going to share one more thing from me. So I honestly think if I had not gone to treatment, I would have, well, I know I would have relapsed because I was already starting to do the mental, you know, well, it's not this bad and whatever. And I can, you know, and so thank goodness my family intervened and called the one person that they knew that was in recovery. And that person said, get her to treatment. And the things that I would not have shared with anybody were the things I shared in treatment that were transformative and, you know, reduce. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is not a big deal. And I'm thinking I'm the worst person in the world or whatever. So that was just me. So, okay. The next comment is, speaking of travel. So this is from the person that commented earlier with the husband lying. Speaking of travel, my husband took the next 2 weeks off from work stating he needs a vacation. I shouldn't be sarcastic. I'm sorry. He is planning on going alone, and I have no right to be concerned or say anything.
Okay, so if I were this person, and I would make sure I had a lawyer. I would make sure I knew my rights and that my finances were in the right place so that someone couldn't walk off with my shared finances, because I would worry that this is a partner who's having a really serious affair or something like it, or just acting out all over the place. That's how I would feel. And by the way, I don't know, I get, like in my marriage, 18 years, I have actually gone off to see friends that I went to high school with 30 years ago and gone up to the mountains and had fun. I know that Tammy goes hiking with friends who visit, but I would never want to be away from my spouse for 2 weeks for any reason, like unless I have to for work or something. I mean, that's what home is, right? It's the two of us. So there's something very wrong with this. And I would call a lawyer. I mean that seriously. I mean, something just feels really icky to me for you. That's all I can say. I don't know you.
So, so is it fair for a partner to demand inpatient therapy to consider staying in a relationship together?
Well, I think it's fair for a partner to demand anything they want. I mean, you may not get it, but I think a more important comment that I can make to you around that question is this: don't ever threaten something you're not going to follow through on. I think this is very problematic for couples. In other words, if you say to your wife, you know, you have to go, if you say to your wife, you have to go to treatment, I'm sick of your drinking, whatever it is, and if you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving or I'm done. You better be ready to leave or be done, because the minute that she keeps drinking and you're still home, you have no credibility. And I've seen couples, you know, in a moment of anger, I'm leaving you if you keep doing this. Oh yeah, well go ahead, and then you don't. And that doesn't mean, so yes, I do think that whatever it is that you think is important, that is meaningful to you, it would help maybe if you got his therapist or his sister or a friend involved, so that it isn't just this he said, she said, you know, and maybe you could do it in a couples therapy. I don't know. But I would say about that, don't just go see any therapist, because there are many therapists who'll say, oh, well, it's just an affair. You know, you don't get a treatment for that. And it's like, well, but he's had 5 of them and he's also done all of this. Well, I'm not sure. You know, you do need a couples therapist who knows what they're doing. Yeah.
And I think there's different ways of demanding too. You know, I think, you know, for some it's like, okay, you've been trying to get in recovery for the last 6 months and it's just not worked. I'm concerned and I don't think that I can stay in this relationship. So that sounds different than, if you don't go to the treatment, I'm going to leave. So I think that there are different kinds. I mean, ultimately it's still a demand. I'm looking for you to get help, because this isn't working for all of us. So.
Well, I mean, I could reframe that as I'm really looking for reasons to stay with you. And I actually think that's true for a lot of partners. Like when you go through our cell phone bills and you want to look at our bank accounts and you want all of the, lock codes to our internet stuff, I actually don't think you're only looking to prove that we're lying to you. I actually think you're trying to find reasons to stay. I really believe that. So, but I think it's perfectly fair to say I want reasons to stay with you. And after the ways you've acted and these things that you've done, A, B, C, D, it's really hard for me to want to be able to stay as much as I want to. This would give me a reason to stay. That I'd go for a line like that. Hey, Tammy, there's one I want you to ask because we're almost done. There's a question.
I know.
It's the one about travel.
There's really good questions, and we're sorry we're not going to get.
This is good for everybody.
Yeah, this is important. Can a sex addict that travels for work stay in that job without relapsing, or is there a need to find a new career in order to facilitate recovery?
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of travel you do and how you do it. I mean, some people travel to different places all the time and they never know where, and that requires a lot of work because you have to plan out an evening, get to a 12-step, you have to really, or make sure I'm not saying this right. I think that if you plan out a really clear recovery plan, you can go anywhere in the world and do anything. If you have connections, but here's how I would think about it. If every week you call Joe because you're used to calling Joe every week and you're always calling Joe to rely on him, you see him at your support groups, whatever, then when you're in trouble, you're probably going to call Joe because you're used to calling Joe all the time. But if you say, oh yeah, Joe, I'm going to put your phone number in my wallet and I'll call you if I'm in trouble, when you're in trouble, you will never call him because you have to get used to that pattern of reaching out and having that relationship there. Otherwise, you're certainly not going to reach out when you're in trouble. So I think travel is about setting up accountability and structure where you are internally, externally, all of it. And is you go to the same place a lot. That would mean you could set up some recovery things there. Are you going someplace new? Well, what's online? What's available? How can you, I just think, yes, it is absolutely doable, but it requires work. I can't just say, well, I'm going to travel and I'll be fine because I've been working on this. No, you have to say, I'm going to travel, which is an extra risk, which means I have to put a plan in place for when I travel because I know that travel will be harder for me. It's like that. Anyway, I'm going to go eat some dinner, if that's okay. Tammy, do you need me here?
No, I'm finishing typing one answer to someone, and then I'll see you in Minnesota.
I'll see you in Minneapolis.
Yes. So actually, I'm going to answer this other question live. And so, but
okay, I'll
anyway,
see you guys later. Have a great evening. And I'll be in the rooms Friday, I'm pretty sure. So
yes, you will.
Find me there. Bye.
Better you than me. So, okay. So there's a question, and feel free to leave, but there's a question about wife is a year in sex porn addiction recovery. We are seeing a therapist individually and a couple. She feels listening to your weekly podcast and therapy is enough for her, although she's already had 2 slips. Can I expect to see more from her to begin trust again? Is there a right to request 12 SA program? Weekly meetings, her self-assuredness worries me. Like I said earlier, I don't ever take my recovery for granted. I don't pretend I got it all wrapped up with a bow. I would, if I was relapsing, I would be looking for a higher level of help. When I first got in recovery, I was going to at least one 12-step meeting, at least one 12-step meeting a day. It was actually like 10 a week. Granted, I really needed to focus, so that was important to me. But if I wasn't putting in almost as much time into my recovery as I was focusing on my addiction early on, that's kind of a measure for me, is like I had all this time, because if I wasn't acting out, I was thinking about acting out, I was planning the next acting out, I was remembering, it was hours every day. So therefore I had hours every day. And so investing that back into recovery, was transformative for me. The other thing is, with anything, you get out of it what you put into it. So if she's only dabbling, and this is my word, but if it's like, oh, I'm going to go to see my therapist this week and I'm going to listen to that, I'm not I'm not engaging, I'm not serving, I'm not doing, like Rob said, I'm not making coffee, I'm not doing, all of those things that are really important. So, it's the connections in a healthy way if she doesn't have a female sponsor that she's calling every day, if she's not working the 12-step program, like that means, has written her 4th step and is getting ready to share her 5th or whatever, but like there should be actual tracking of, and this is for her or anybody else. So I'm not picking on her. I'm stating it more in a global way. But if there isn't accountability, then within her program or anybody's program, then chances of relapse are high. And every time there's a relapse, the clock resets because you now have reason not to trust. So if it takes a year or 18 months to build trust in recovery, and there's another relapse, the clock starts over again. So, that's a wheel that's no fun to be on. So there's other questions, and I wish Dr. Rob could stay around and answer them. We could do this all night and all day and all night, but we have other things to do. So I'm going to go do a ballroom dance lesson with my husband because the joys of recovery, we get to do some cool things. So anyway, till next time, we'll see you next week. And there's other the Pro Dependence webinar is on this week on Friday. There isn't one Wednesday morning. The Old Lady Posse group is tomorrow morning. So check out the website I gave you in the chat. And until next week, reach out to us if you need any resources. So take care. Bye-bye.